Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm John Pitman, music director for Portland's all classical radio station, All Classical. Thank you for coming to our Concert Conversations, a partnership between the Oregon Symphony and All Classical. To my right is our esteemed music director of the Oregon Symphony, Carlos Kalmar.
Good evening, everybody. Hey.
This
you have
evening,
such a list. Oh my God.
I have list.
We have a territory to cover, right?
Yes, I have a lot to get through in the next 30 minutes with you. So, let's start. Do you want to do chronological or do you
I
care?
just follow your lead.
Okay. I could have been a contender. I could have been somebody. You're featuring the one and only film score written by one of America's greatest composers, Leonard Bernstein, On the Waterfront.
And boy, that was not a real success with him, meaning he actually didn't like it. He liked the writing. Well, actually, Leonard Bernstein never cared for film music. It's very different from other composers like Erich Wolfgang Korngold, even Dmitri Shostakovich, who wrote a lot of film scores, but Bernstein said like, no, not for me. And then he was approached to write the score for Elia Kazan's On the Waterfront, and he kind of reluctantly did so. And the result was a disaster because even though Leonard Bernstein undoubtedly is a genius, he didn't take enough into consideration that a movie is not about the music. The music has to adapt to the film, not the other way around. And there was trouble because you have to imagine, it's very simple what happened to Leonard Bernstein. You see a movie and you see, for example, in this, did everybody here in the room see On the Waterfront?
Show of hands. There we go.
Whoever didn't ever see the movie, go and run and go to a video store and really rent it, because it's one of the greatest movies ever done. Now the thing is this, for example, in this movie there are some violent action happening in the docks of New York. Beatings and so on. And when it comes to that, of course, the music has to grow with intention according to what is being shown in the plot. And when, for example, at the end of something, I'm just making this up, at the end of some of these fights, there is a shooting, exactly with the shoot has to be an explosion of music or something like that. And if that doesn't happen, it's a little bit odd. Because then imagine this, that everything is mounting in tension in what you see visually, but the music goes down, and then there is maybe a shooting, and thus everything is like, 30 seconds later, then the music mounts. It's completely out of whack. And that is what happened to Leonard Bernstein. So he presented his score, and the guys from the movie took the scissors out and said, can't use that, cannot use that. No, really, no, not there. So in the end, he was pretty desperate, and the people from the movies told him, you know what, do a suite. We will use your music, and we will use it according to what we need, but make maybe a symphonic suite of your own that you can present to a wonderful orchestra like the Oregon Symphony, and so be it, just without any movie. And that's what he did.
Yeah, and there are actually at least two recordings that he made of that suite. So he must have placed quite a bit of value on the work he put into the film, the themes and the development of those themes.
Well, I mean, suffice to say, this is great music. It's absolutely stunning music. It has everything that we like Bernstein for, which is very rhythmical and very emotionally caring, loving, and passionate. And it is a very typical score by Leonard Bernstein. Interesting enough, in the big scheme of things, we discovered this while we were rehearsing for the program you're going to hear tonight. The program you're going to hear tonight, just to, as an overview, it doesn't have a theme, but all the music you're going to hear is somewhat American, because the Dvorak Concerto was actually written and inspired here in America. And the underlying tone of tonight's concert is very lyrical, although the music explodes at times with incredible force. So, for example, in The Waterfront, this is the story of the problems of a very young man with the corrupt unions in the docks of New York back then. And the other centerpiece of the movie is a love story. And this is the movie that made Marlon Brando very famous. Academy Award for him, Yves-Marie Saint, Carl Malden, really a phenomenal...
E.J. Cobb is the main protagonist in the film.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's a great movie, right?
Yes, and I was going to say that I watched it several months back, and the film, the music that Bernstein wrote makes a very strong impression, yet at the same time it's not overbearing. It doesn't dominate over the action or the story. It seems to fit very well, even though he may not have been cut out to be a film composer.
Not at all. He actually was nominated to win the Academy Award for this score, and as it all very often is with Oscars, people who are very good and very famous and in a way deserve the Oscars don't win it. Somebody won it that year. Don't ask me who it was. Some music. But the thing is that in this music you have this, the fights at the docks in New York, and with the very famous Presto Barbaro. It's very fast and very, very rude music, very aggressive. And then you have this soothing melody of the love story between Marlon Brando and Yves-Marie Saint. And actually, the predominant part of the score is the love music.
Mm-hmm. There's love music of a different kind to be found in the Dvorak Cello Concerto. This great big concerto, which is arguably the greatest of all cello concertos, has, at the end at least, an underlying subtext, a little love letter being sent out to someone who was very dear to Dvorak, that he remembered from his younger years.
Well, Dvorak once upon a time when he was young was very much in love with a lady called Josefina, and as the story goes, he married the sister of Josefina, but always had kind of a warm spot in his heart for Josefina, and he kind of thought of her when he wrote this piece. The interesting point in the Dvorak Cello Concerto, because you see, on our days, whenever we approach any cellist in this world, any conductor, any promoter will always ask first, can you play Dvorak Cello Concerto? So we always think it is for granted that Dvorak Cello Concerto will always be there. However, it has to be said that this concerto didn't come so easily to Dvorak, and for sure not very early in his life. Very early in his life he wrote actually something like a cello concerto, and he never orchestrated it, and it's kind of forgotten somewhere in the bookshelves. Maybe somebody orchestrates it, and maybe I don't know the piece. And later it was kind of accepted throughout many composers of this magnitude that you cannot write a cello concerto, because the cello doesn't carry the weight and the sound of what a concerto actually should be. Have you asked yourself, why does it happen in our classical music repertoire that we have either violin concertos or piano concertos, and all the other instruments are like, It is like that. It's insane. Why did Beethoven, really a master of many instruments, not write a cello concerto? He didn't, and Mozart don't even think about it, and so on and so on and so on. And Dvorak is in that tradition, and the story goes, Dvorak then was actually visiting professor here in America, New York. And he went to a concert where Victor Herbert premiered Victor Herbert's Second Cello Concerto, which fairly recently a radio station that I know very well played.
Yes.
I mean, these guys do tremendous work, also trying to kind of match to the occasion, because of course the 89.9, the music director, John, knew Dvorak Concerto is coming up, so I'm sure you thought about, okay, let's show all the Oregonians and everybody who streams online what led to.
Yeah, it's nice to delve into a possible source of inspiration. The Victor Herbert, the Dublin-born composer who came to America, he married an opera singer. I don't want to get too far off the point, but apparently Dvorak did hear Victor Herbert's cello concerto and realized, hey, it can be done. And you were right about the cello, that while it is a very strong instrument on its own, if you get a big enough orchestra behind it, it can get kind of swallowed up if the music isn't written just the right way.
It needs to be instrumentated very carefully, because, I mean, we musicians secretly, we always, or most of us, probably think this is the most beautiful instrument there is in any orchestra, the cello, because the cello has something so close to human voice. Now, Dvorak heard this cello concerto of Victor Herbert, and he went to listen a second time and then started to write his own piece. And allegedly, there is also a quoting of a very early song by Dvorak in the second movement, which is a song that this wonderful lady, Josefina, liked very much. And so there is the context. And the third thing that is, in a way, interesting to know is whenever a composer finishes a work, and we are talking about a really large work of music, then he goes to the editor, or he goes to fellow musicians, or he goes to a friend, anybody, and asks these people to correct the material, to just look where there are things that do not match, where there might be little things in the score that don't line up, or one note has been missing, something like that. Well, one of those fellows who read the Dvorak Concerto before it was published was Johannes Brahms, a friend of Dvorak. And Johannes Brahms can be quoted saying, "If I only knew that such a concerto can be written, I would have written one myself long ago." Brahms was old at that time and died a year later. God, that would have been a cool concerto, right?
He came close with the double concerto, though.
Which we played fairly recently with Pinkas and Amanda.
Right. And you mentioned Beethoven earlier, not writing a cello concerto, but the triple concerto, violin, piano, and cello. And you guys are doing that in the upcoming Beethoven Festival.
Well, that is an interesting thing, because it again shows Beethoven at one of his very interesting points. The cello concerto by Dvorak is undoubtedly the most important cello concerto ever written. Very difficult, but not impossible. Well written. Just take that. The triple concerto, which we play next week, with, amongst others, Kirin, our soloist of tonight, that is pretty impossible to play. It's insane. It's Beethoven.
Carlos, you had to give some of us at the station a little bit of a little primer on how to pronounce the Dutch cellist's name, because you look at it on the page and it's like, how would you
on earth are we going to do
that? But it's Kirin Viersen.
There you have it.
Okay. Thank you.
Kirin Viersen. You know how I just have very briefly to tell you something about Kirin. Kirin, I found her, we met first in a restaurant in Amsterdam, because I was doing for whatever reason there is, I can tell you this, for probably 7 to 8, maybe even 10 years, whenever I had to conduct a cello concerto, I always used the same cellist. Always. Alban Gerhardt has been here. Great German cellist. We are good friends. I just love his work. He couldn't do this. And I was like, oh God, what am I going to do now? Yo-Yo Ma is not available.
Till next season.
Till next season. And then I remembered something, and this is some 6 years ago, I think it was, or maybe only 5. Alba and I played in the Concertgebouw in Amsterdam, Prokofiev. And after the concert, we went to have dinner in a restaurant very close by. And while we were eating, waltzes in Benjamin Schmidt. I think he comes next season to play a concerto, I hope. I'm not sure. No, he canceled this. Anyway, Benjamin Schmidt, a very, very, very fine Austrian violinist. And with him came a Dutch cellist whom I've never seen, but I knew the name, and we were introduced. Aha, Kirin Viersen, hi, how are you? La 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 la, goodbye. Afterwards, as I very often do, I ask, okay, and how does she play? And Alban said something that he very rarely says. Alban, when it comes to cellists, is like, no. Oh, no, really not. And that one, Yo-Yo Ma maybe. Oh, yeah, it's very tough. And he said, she is really good. And I thought, like, well, let's see whether Kirin is available. And here she is, first time in the United States with an orchestra.
So we'll welcome her very warmly tonight to Portland, won't we? And as you said, she'll be here next week. You know, I have to do another little side note. You mentioned, you conducted Alban Gerhardt conducting the Prokofiev Concerto. I was there for that concert.
Yeah, we met just before the concert.
Yes.
Right?
I took a group of our all-classical listeners to Amsterdam, and that was the thing we did the first night.
See, it all comes back into Portland. This is the navel.
The center of the universe. Absolutely. Samuel Barber is another major American composer, and you're featuring not the Adagio for strings, but a piece that when people listen to it, they might think, yeah, I can guess that would come from the same composer who brought us the Adagio, because this music for a scene from Shelley has, at least in parts of it, that same kind of sense of lyricism and mellowness to it. Not exclusively, but in some parts.
It's one of the wonderful examples how at least I would say that, how to write a musical arch. Meaning, when the music starts with kind of very low tension and it ends with very low tension, and in the middle it makes this movement. It's a very slow-paced, very lyrical piece where the tension mounts immensely until it explodes, and then it trickles down and it's over. Now this is written it is inspired by a scene from Shelley's Prometheus Unbound, and it has actually not really something to do with the play. And it's not even descriptive of what is going on in the play. It's just, he got the inspiration because he liked something that was being said at the moment in the play. And we are talking here about Samuel Barber being very young. He was, I think, 23 years old. This is his first composition for orchestra that he ever heard, and it was very successful.
Glad to hear it. Because he went on to bring us several other very nice
Trust me, you will
pieces.
really like it. It's very good music.
So would you say that the Barber scene from Shelley kind of sets us up for the mood or moods to be explored in the work by Aaron J. Kernis, our, if we could say, youngest of our composers on the program?
Well, you know, as I have already said, it sets up the tone for the night, because the music for a scene from Shelley uses, as Barber very often does, quite a big orchestra, and he starts very quietly and is very lyrical and then mounts in energy, and then in the middle the music climaxes really loudly, and then, as I said, it trickles down. Dvorak Cello Concerto, undoubtedly one of the most lyrical movements ever written, is the second. Gosh, that's a great movement. Newly Drawn Sky is a very lyrical piece that really explodes here and there. And as we already talked about Bernstein's On the Waterfront, yeah, there are these fights on the docks of New York and this presto barbaro is fast-paced music, but the focal point is more on the love, which is also a very lyrical and very passionate thing. So, in a way, the music for a scene from Shelley, which is a piece 8.5 minutes, give or take, it sets the tone, I would say, not only for the Newly Drawn Sky, it sets the tone for everything in the program.
The genesis of Newly Drawn Sky was an experience that the composer had actually on a beach. I'm going to presume on the East Coast because that's primarily where he's based. But
don't you think it would have been nicer if you would have been on the beaches here in the West? Come on.
I would have liked, Pacific City or something like that. But and which is what I envision every time I hear this piece. I can see the steep hills climbing behind me with the trees and those blasts of sunlight that can come through those thick dark clouds. Kernes is seeing through his music that kind of continual change that happens or can happen in a sky, and is expressing it in the music.
Is
it not so literal as that?
It is very. It's absolutely what you say. The only thing that I kind of am always thinking about this piece and trying to express is this is not a symphonic poem. It's more the inspiration of something you see through the lens of music. Aaron Jay, whom I know personally, is a guy that in a way always likes to put whatever there is possible in music, meaning consonance, dissonance, passion, no passion, tranquility, tension, and so on. And this piece, which in a way, it has something to do very clearly with a sunset. But it's not exactly the description of a sunset. It is more, I think what you said, meaning you sit on the beach, doesn't matter on which coast, and you look the sun going down, and please, it has to be a cloudy day, slightly. Because you somehow experience through music this different clouds, the different layers of light, and whatever is possible, of course, also water of the ocean coming at you. But it's not exactly like a painting works. It's just in a way, if you want to use that word, an intellectual depiction of what that could be. Aaron Jay wrote this piece when he was probably in the East Coast with his twins, at that time 6 months old. Whenever I read that, I think like, come on, Aaron Jay, you had even time to think about a piece? At that time, no. I mean, little children. And
or as busy as he is as a composer, how do you have time for kids, right? Okay, enough of that.
No, they are really a wonderful family. I met all of them, of course, when in Grant Park in Chicago we recorded this piece amongst many others. This is a piece written in 2005, commissioned by the Ravinia Festival and the Chicago Symphony Orchestra for the orchestra and the festival, and James Conlon. It was his first year at Ravinia. It is, I believe, one of the strongest American statements in the last 10 years, for sure. You will enjoy it, just kind of let it draw you in. It's astounding what he can do with music, and it's very virtuosic. One thing I want to tell you a little bit about him as a composer. I had the pleasure, and I'm not lobbying for a recording that I made, I just tell you this as an experience. Over the years I have had the pleasure of recording with the Grant Park Orchestra a couple of American pieces. One is an entire CD based on music by Aaron Jay, others with music by John Corigliano, Barbara Kolb, John Harbison, and I always like to remember how different composers can be when it comes to working with an orchestra and with a conductor. Because you know how let's assume Aaron J. would be here. Then we would, of course, invite him to a rehearsal. I would stand here, I would work like crazy, and then I would turn around and say, Aaron J., so give me feedback. Are we missing? Aaron J. would probably walk up with his score and start in bar 423, the third horn, a little bit louder. And in bar 74, the fifth oboe, not so much. Something like that's Aaron J. It's incredible. And this is very opposed as people like John Harbison, a man whom I really like in Boston, who sits there. I recorded his partita, very tricky 4-movement piece. John sat in the rehearsal. I worked. Then I stopped, sent everybody for coffee, and said, we're going to review the piece again after. Went to John and said, I mean, this is one of the crucial moments for a conductor. Trust me, you go to a composer, a really creative mind, and think like, have I messed up everything, or have I done something well? And John sits there very relaxed, looks at me and said, I think I'm in good hands. And that's all he said. Through the entire, he never came on stage and said, bar 420. No. And Corigliano is kind of in the middle, knows exactly what he wants to hear, but is more the energetic type of human being. So it's always fascinating to encounter all these composers.
So tonight we're going to have music that is lyrical, occasionally explosive, and it seems, as I mentioned in our final minute here, different aspects of the American experience too.
Absolutely. This is kind of our American program for the season. I mean, it's all Americana, even the Dvorak somehow.
An American connection, certainly.
Yeah.
Carlos Kalmar, thank you very much.
John, pleasure as always.
All right. Thank you for coming.